Hi, sixth graders. Hope you are all doing well. We are in Unit 9, our Applying Percents unit. Our lesson today is on percent equation and percent proportion. Our learning target that you should write down is I can solve problems using the percent proportion and or equation. Okay, a vocab here that we need to write down is the percent proportion, and you should write this part down with it, so this whole sentence. A percent proportion compares part of a quantity to a whole quantity for one ratio and lists the percent as a number over 100 for the other ratio. Okay, and then in this box is really important, knowing both parts of it too. So is over of equals percent over 100, or part over whole equals percent over 100. So we use this percent proportion, and later we'll learn about the equation, in order to find missing parts. So maybe we know the whole amount and the percent, and we want to figure out the part, or maybe we know the part and the percent, but we're trying to figure out what the whole amount was to start with. Using the percent proportion can help us find that. And we can think of it again as is over of equals percent over 100. Okay. So, study tip here to write down the percent proportion. The part, which goes with the is, usually comes before or after the word is, and the whole usually comes before or after the word of. So they're kind of connected together in that way. So types of percent problems that you might see, you might be asked to find the percent. You might be asked to find the part, which is the is. Or you might be asked to find the whole, which is the of. Okay, and there's different examples. So what percent of 6 is 3? Since it says what percent, that's what you're looking for. What number is, okay, that tells us we're trying to find the is. 3 is 50% of what number? That tells us we're trying to find the of. And they use the proportion over here to set that up. And we'll go through some examples together on the next slide about how to set these up and how to solve them. Okay, so we're going to practice some here. The biggest thing to figure out is, what are you looking for? What is it that you are trying to find, or what part don't you know? And that's what your variable is. And then we're going to set it up using, again, this is over of equals percent over 100. Same thing as part over whole, and then percent over 100. That doesn't change at all. So if I were to look at this question, what percent of 24 is 18? Well, I see what percent. That's what I'm trying to find. So if I'm setting up my proportion, 100 is always on the bottom. The percent is what we're trying to look for. So that's where our variable goes. Then of 24 is 18. So of goes on the bottom, so 24. The is on the top. Now in order to solve this, if you think back to solving proportions, cross multiply. So 18 times 100 equals 24 times x. You can use calculators here. 18 times 100 is 1080 equals 24x. Divide both sides by 24 to solve for x. Which is 75. So your answer for that one, and since it asked for a percent, you need to include a percent sign on your answer. 75%. Okay. Let's move over to the right here. What number is 60% of 150? Well, anytime a number has a percent sign on it, it automatically goes in the percent spot on our proportion. And the percent is always over the 100. So then, of 150, of goes on the bottom. What number is, that's what you're trying to find, so that goes on the top. Cross multiply to solve again. So we will have 60 times 150, which is 9,000, equals 100 times x. Divide both sides by 100. So 9,000 divided by 100 is 90. So your answer would be 90. So on the target check, you would just enter in 90. Okay. Last one here with percent proportion. 13 is 26% of what number? Okay. 26%, it has a percent sign on it, so it automatically goes above the 100. Then 13 is over of, so 13 on the top. Of what number? That's what you are trying to find. Cross multiply to solve. 13 times 100 would be 1,300 equals 26x. 1,300, you're going to divide both sides by 26. And x equals 50. So your of would be 50. Okay, that's the percent proportion. Okay, the percent equation is another way to solve for the missing parts of our problem. So there's a couple ways that you could do this, or that we can look at this. One of them is part equals percent times whole. And the other way, with the other words we know, is equals percent times of. Just like before with the percent equation, you plug the parts into where they belong, so either into the percent spot or the is or the of, and then solve for your missing piece. The big thing to know with this is that the percent has to be written as a decimal. When we were using the percent proportion, if it was 35%, we just plugged it in as 35. However, with the equation, we would need to turn that 35% into a decimal instead, which is what it's saying here in this study tip, that it must be converted to a decimal or a percent when it's used. Okay, so make sure you've got those written down in your notebook. What they have here is just a different way to show that, but I think what I wrote down will make the most sense for you. Okay. Again, just like with the percent proportion, there's different things that we could be looking for. So it could ask us to find the part, the percent, or the whole, depending on what the question is asking us. You just look at what you have and figure out what it's asking for, and then solve for your missing parts. Okay, so again, is equals percent times of, and this needs to be a decimal. Or a fraction, I just think decimal is easier. Okay, the first example, 600 is what percent of 750? So what percent, that's what you were trying to find, 600 is of 750. So if I'm plugging my parts into this, okay, we would have 600 is equal, we don't know the percent, that's what we're trying to find, times the of, which is 750. Now to solve this, since they're multiplying by our variable, we are going to divide both sides by 750. So on my calculator, 600 divided by 750, 0.8. Now it's asking for what percent, so we need to turn this decimal into a percent, so we need to move the decimal 2 spots to the right. Oops. Let's try that again. 1, 2. Fill in with a 0, so it would be 80%. So if they're asking you to find the percent, once you get your answer back, you need to move the decimal 2 spots to turn it into a decimal or into a percent. You cannot keep it as a decimal. Okay. Next one, 45 is 90% of what number? So 45 is 90% of what number? So the of is what we are looking for. That's where we'll plug in our variable. So 45 is on our left side. Now we need to do the percent as a decimal. So 90%, move the decimal 2 back, would be 0.9 times the of. That's what we're trying to find. So for here, we are going to divide both sides by 0.9. So 45 divided by 0.9 is 50, which makes sense because the of goes with our whole. So it would make sense that our answer is more than what we started with, or more than the is, because the is the part. Okay, so 50. Next one, what number is 30% of 70? So again, is equals percent times of. So what number is, that's the part we're looking for. percent, turn it into a decimal, would be 0.3. Anytime you turn a percent into a decimal, move it 2 spots to the left. And we're going to multiply by the of, which is 70. Now everything's on the same side, so we don't have to work backwards. We just go 0.3 times 70. And our answer is 21. Just like in our first video here where we were finding percent of a number, that's exactly what we just did. Okay. Study tip, again, remember to write the decimal as a percent in your final answer. So if it's asking you about finding the percent, you need to turn your decimal back into a percent. Okay, so at this point, I want you to do, you can test out both of them and see which one makes more sense between the percent proportion or the percent equation. But in the end, I want you to really find one or pick one of the methods and that works best for you. And I want you to practice that one the most and really get a master at that one. So there's 6 examples here, and I want you to pause here and try these problems on your own, either using the percent proportion or the percent equation. After you have solved them, come back to the video, and I will go to the next screen and I will have them walked out in both the percent proportion and percent equation, so you can just check over your work. I'm not going to walk through them with you, but I want you to be able to see how you would set it up and the steps that you would have gone to solve them. So pick which method you want to use, try some or all of these problems, and then go to the next part of the video and check over to see if you did it correctly. All right, so if you take a look here, I split it up. One side is solving it using the proportion method, one side is using it solving the equation method, and I wrote both the proportion and the equation at the top for a reminder. Then I set up the problem and I went through and solved it, either by cross multiplication if I use the proportion method or by working backwards if I use the equation. The biggest thing to remember on number 1, if you use the equation, you get a decimal answer, but it's asking about the percent, so you need to move the decimal to make it into a percent. Same thing on number 2. Number 3, with this one, if you're using the equation, you have to turn the 35% into a decimal before you plug it into the equation. So then you make it 0.35, and then you do your multiplication. Okay, so look through, check to make sure that you set it up correctly. That's the biggest part, making sure that your numbers are in the correct spot. All right, here again, you can look over, pause, and check to see that you set up the problem correctly, depending on if you use the proportion or the equation, and then look to see, did you follow the correct steps? Again, the biggest thing when you're using the equation, you have to convert between decimal and percent when you're solving for that, okay? All right. Okay, last thing that I want to talk about is word problems. This one here, a survey found that 25% of people age 18 to 24 gave up their home phone and only use a cell phone. If 3,264 people only use a cell phone, how many people were surveyed? Okay. So, again, you could use, now I'm going to think of it more as the part over whole equals percent over 100, or part equals percent times whole. Because with the word problems, it's easier to think about, is that part of the problem or the amount of people, or is that the entire whole amount, and then figure out where it goes from there. The 25% is easy to figure out. Percent always goes over 100. Now, the people that said they used the cell phone, that's only a portion of the people that were surveyed. The people surveyed is like our whole amount. So that's what we are trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out how many total people they surveyed. And the people who said cell phone was the 3,264. So that falls under our part. Now we can solve this by cross multiplying. 3,264 equals 25x. Divide by 25. So let's see, 3,26400 divide by 25. 13,056 people. That's how many total people were surveyed, the whole amount. Or using the percent equation, the 3,000 264 is the part of the people that were surveyed. 25%, write it as a decimal, times the whole. That's what we're trying to figure out. Divide both sides by 0.25. 3264 divided by 0.25. 13,056 people. Okay. And it makes sense that our answer is larger. Always think about that. Does your answer make sense with what it's asking? If it's asking for the part, it should probably be less than your whole amount unless it was over 100%. Where in this case, we're looking for the whole, so we would expect that to be over the amount that, like the part of the people that said cell phone only. So there is percent proportion equation. Decide which one works best for you and which one you're going to use, and really become a master with that one and use that one to solve the target check.